Welcome to the lecture. So let's create one more project called post and we'll do the CRUD operations on it. Okay, so call it post. Okay, in this lecture we're going to see how do you create the tables and what fields we use for the table. Okay, we'll still use the same database OOPs, and in this we'll create one more table. Okay, so we'll create the table and we'll call it table OOP post. Okay, we'll call it post and we'll create three fields: ID, title, and then we'll create a content. Okay, so we'll create three fields. First we'll say ID, then we'll say title, then we'll say content, and we'll say varchar of 500, that is the content, varchar of 100. Okay, and we'll leave it to ID, and then we'll call it as primary key, and we'll say go. Okay, and we'll say AI, that is the auto increment. We'll check this. Okay, so you have your ID that you don't have to create, it's automatically incremented. It's a primary key. Okay, it's a type int. Title and content is varchar 100 and 500. Okay, so let's save this table. So this table oops post has been created, and you can go ahead and add some records to it. Okay, so we'll say we don't have to pass one because this auto incremented, so it will just create the value. So say this is the first post. Welcome to oops. This is the second post. Okay, and then you can say go to browse, and you can see your two records, and your ID is auto incremented, it's automatically added. This is first post, this is second post, that's the title, and then you have your content. Okay, and from the class we'll also try to insert the data, update the data, delete the data. Okay, and then we'll query the data as well. So for this project, remember you need to have a DB OOP database, and inside it create table OOP post, and in that you basically create three fields in the tables: ID, title, and content. And ID, you make sure it is primary key and also it is auto incremented. Let's say you have created this table and you have forgot to add the auto increment. You can just go to structure and you can change it. First you have to make it primary key, and then you can go to change, and then there's a check mark here, you check mark and save it. Okay, this is if you have forgot to make auto increment for your fields. Okay, go to your table, structure, change, click on AI. Okay, this will change your auto increment, so you don't have to worry about inserting the IDs for your tables. Well, that's all on this lecture on creating the database and tables, and the next lecture we'll try to use these details in the configuration file. Hello and welcome to the lecture. Let's do the configuration now. So for this we have created a post. So what we will do, we'll try to reuse. Well, that's the main purpose of learning OOPs, and so that when we write something we want to reuse it. So we'll copy database.php and the config folder. Okay, config anyway you can create it, but the most important thing is we have built a library of database.php we will reuse for post as well. So let's open your configuration. So in this lecture we're going to just look at configuration. In the next lecture we will try to enhance our post class. Okay, localhost is correct, root is correct, their password is correct, the database is called as db_oop. Okay, it's the same database. Okay, so you don't have to change anything. If you have done previously from the database, you can use the same database. That's nothing but your db_oop. The only thing that is changed is the table OOP posts. Okay, and if you look at your database.php, okay, don't get surprised, you haven't mentioned anything about the table, right? It's all built in such a way that whatever details you pass to it, it executes that code. So you've wrapped your PDO code in a class, right? And it doesn't really know what are the database details. Nothing is hard coded, nor it doesn't know anything about your table. It's a utility. You have to feed in all the details and then it starts executing those code. Okay, that's the beauty of this database and OOPs design. Mostly about the OOPs design, that you can store whatever value you want to store via the property, and then all the methods work on those properties. So your instances can connect to multiple databases, and then each instance can work in that property that has been holding that connection details with that database. Okay, so that's all on this lecture on how to create the config file. So config file we're going to reuse, and we also can reuse the database.php. Okay, so that's all for this lecture, and see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture. So let's write insert. Okay, so let's enhance this. Insert records. So we'll say add post, and it will accept the array. Okay, that's where we save our post. Okay, and then we have to prepare our query, right? That is the first step, and this time we have to say insert into table underscore posts. Okay, which field we're going to pass? Title and content. Okay, and we're going to say values title and colon content. Okay, these two we have to bind it. Okay, how do you bind values? You use the bind title, then you have data, so it's an array title, then it has content, then you bind the content. Okay, and then you have to execute it, right? Execute, you can actually do an if statement. Okay, now you can call the execute directly. That's why we have separated it out. Okay, and execute will give you true or false. This execute will give you true or false. If you go to database, we have written that execute, it will be true or false. So we can check whether if it's true or false. If it is true, you can simply say return true. Yes, the row is inserted, and else the row is not inserted. Okay, it's as simple as that. Nothing you have done in this program, right? You're just still calling the query, passing the title and the content, and the data holds your title and content, and you're executing it. Okay, so how do you call it? Go add post, go to insert now. Okay, and then $p add post, and you have to see the data. Okay, then you can var dump to get the post. Okay, before that you have to prepare your data as well. Okay, so data is an array, so let's create that array, and it is title. Title value is, let's say, 4. The title value could be, this is the next post. Okay, and then you have content, enjoying the PHP oops, right? This will be inserted in your table. Let's refresh this by clicking up the table name, and you can see there are 2 records, and then we are trying to insert a new record. What we are doing, we are creating a simple array by passing title and content. That's our fields, title and content. Okay, and then we are written an add post. Add post will prepare the statement, insert into tables title and content, take that data from title and content that is passed over, execute it, nothing else, right? Let's run this. Okay, once you run this, you can see the 3rd record created, and if you refresh it, you can see your 3rd post. If you keep run it again, you'll get one more post. That's the next one, but new ID. Okay, so this is how you basically, with just few lines of code, right, how to call it, just 2 lines. And here also you haven't done anything, you're just reusing all the things that you have defined previously in the database, right? You see here also reusing, binding also reusing, and you are just executing. Executing is just again a method that's internally also reused, and you are reusing from outside, and you also know whether it is successfully inserted or not, right? So next, let's work on update. So let's look at update in the next lecture. Hello and welcome to the lecture. So let's see how you can select the record from the post. Okay, we're going to do the CRUD operation: select, insert, update and delete. So in the next 4 lectures, each lecture we're going to talk about select, the next 3 lectures we're going to talk about insert, update and delete. Okay, so for this we will create a file called post.php. Okay, this post.php will be connecting to post database, and then we'll have another file, test file, to test our post.php. So we have post.php test file. Okay, so let's open these 2 files. Okay, and remember why we are doing database and post. Database is only working on the database. Post is advising database which database to connect. Okay, and it's wrapping the whole post database. Post test is basically testing the post class. Okay, so let's create the post class first. Okay, the first thing we need is the database, right? So database is available for us. Okay, so let's create the post. Okay, and we're gonna hold the database instance in the DB. Okay, and how you're gonna create the database in the constructor. Okay, so this statement is basically will go and connect to the database with whatever the config that you have decided. Okay, and then when you create an instance of a post, the connection database has been done. Okay, so this is wrapped around the post. Okay, so we will write 2 methods, get all post, get one post. Okay, we'll write this 2 post inside the select query, and then we'll try to fetch from that table. Okay, so we'll write public function get posts. Okay, then we'll write get post best post by id, and then you pass id to it. Okay, we'll write both these functions. Okay, and then we'll test it. So get post is basically 2 lines of code. Okay, if you remember how we designed our database, you have your DB instance, then you pass the query. Okay, you query select asterisk from table underscore oop underscore posts. Okay, let's verify our table name, table oop posts. Okay, table oop posts, right? That's basically the query. Then you have results, you can capture the results or you can directly return it. You don't have to do even this, you can say this. Okay, db result set, that's all. Okay, and when you say get posts, it will fetch from the post table. Okay, and you see how we are wrapping the database queries in the post class. Post class is wrapping for the post table, right? It's only worry about post table, right? But the database is worried about all the transaction you do with the database. So you leave all those transactions to the database, but you're wrapping the database with one level up and saying, okay, now I want to deal with post table. So it's wrapping all the details for the post table and then leave all the connection details and connectivity to the database. Okay, and how do you get one record? You know, you have to write single here, right? So the query is where id equal to id, right? And then you have to bind it, that's all. Then you say bind, okay, id with the id that has been passed. Okay, very simple. There's nothing you have written here. Okay, you're just querying, returning the result set, querying, binding, return the single instance. Okay, now let's test this. Okay, to test this you need post.php. Okay, and $p is equal to new post. You create an instance. When you create the instance, the connectivity has been done, right? Now you can select, right, $P. You can do a var dump, directly var dump $P of get posts, as simple as that, nothing to be passed over, and get post by ID, and you can say 1. Okay, let's say 2. Okay, nothing else, it's all done, right? All the connectivity is done, the fetching the record from is done. It will just dump the array into the var dump. Okay, let's execute this. Post test. Okay, that's all. You can see both the records, right? This is the first post, second post with content. Then you are calling the number 2, that's the ID, and you pass number 1 and you get number 1. Okay, very simple. You haven't written any code to it. Even if you look at post, there's no code in it, right? You're just doing a binding and then you're calling the single of it. This is the real power of OOPs. You are divided your whole code in such a chunks that you can reuse it n number of times. Okay, and once you do an update, let's say next when you do insert, you want to print something, you use this line, right? As simple as that. Nothing to be done. You don't have to really connect again, you know, fetch the details, process it, do nothing. Just call the method once and it is linked back to post, which is linked back to database. So everyone is doing his own job, and that's why you see the code is modular, right? Database is doing his database job, post is doing post job, and testing is doing just a testing job. Okay, so next let's look at insert in the next lecture. Hello and welcome to the lecture. So let's quickly do the update now. So for this, we'll copy the insert, we'll call it as update. Okay, and instead of add, we will say update post. Okay, instead of insert, I will say update the table. Okay, and we'll say set this title is equal to title. We're going to pass that value, and we're going to say comma here, and content is equal to content. Okay, and where ID is equal to ID. Okay, all right, nothing fancy in the update statement. Update this table where title is equal to this title, content is this content, and ID is this ID. Okay, how do you bind it? You pass the ID, and that's all, right? You execute the same execute method as you did it in the insert statement. Okay, there's nothing to be done here. You just create an update post, change the query, pass the data, and then execute the method. Okay, and here also you just have to update the data now. Okay, just call it ID. Okay, and we're going to change the first record. And we're going to say updated. Okay, so you will see this updated string added to the first record. Okay, instead of add post, we'll say update post. Okay, there's nothing else to be done. If you click on post, you see there's nothing called updated. So when you run this program, this should get updated. So let's run this. Okay, and let's refresh this, and you can see it's updated here, right? And you want to update the next record. Let's say you want to put second number here, run it, verify it's updated. Okay, so even your update statements are working fine. Okay, it's all coming up from this update statement where you are binding the new values to it. Okay, in the next lecture we're going to see delete. Okay, so that's all for the lecture on update. In the next lecture we're going to see delete now. Hello and welcome to the lecture. So let's finish off our delete as well. So you can just copy the update, you can say delete records. Okay, you can say delete post. You don't need data, you just need the ID. and you can say delete from table where ID is this, right? Nothing else to be done. And you just have to do the binding of the ID. It is not from the array but from the fields, and then you have to execute the prepared statement. Okay, so nothing fancy about delete. You're just saying delete from this table where ID is equal to this ID, then this ID is passed as a parameter which you are binding it, and then you execute the statement. Okay, so in the post test you're gonna just say delete post, and we're gonna delete like 6th row, pass 6, right? Let's refresh this before you create it. So 6th will be deleted. So let's delete the first row, right? Let's delete the first row. So you see the first updated has been deleted. Okay, so let's run this and refresh this. So first one is deleted. Let's delete the second one. Okay, you can see the second row is also deleted. So you see, it is so simple to create a CRUD operations with a database. Within like 15 minutes we were able to create the database.php. Then we were able to wrap it with our table called post, and then we were able to execute all the commands like select, insert, update and delete. And I want you to think through of this concept in clearly, right? When you write a class, think about reusability. And when you are thinking about reusability, don't try to put everything in one class, one responsibility. That's what we learn as a solid principle. So think about one class which actually can be reused everywhere, and think about only one responsibility. If you look at the database, I'm not passing any table name here, nor I'm saying you have to connect to this database. It's all coming up from configuration, right? And the database doesn't even know which table to connect. Okay, that's why you have wrapped in the post. The post also talk about only the post table, right? Then you can have users table. The user table, all you have to do is just change the queries and it's ready for the users, and you don't have to change your parent now, right? This is your second principle, right? Open for extension, closed for modification. You're not changing anything when you are extending this, right? Whenever you extend the database, you have a user, you're not changing anything in the database. Everything is modified in the user only. Okay, user is dictating the database and telling them, okay, now this is all my parameters, go do the connection, fetch the records for me. Well, I believe you have really understood the power of OOPs, and this is how you can segregate your code in such a way that reusability and modularity is highly possible with OOPs. Well, that's all on this lecture on this project, and I'll see you in the next one.